Hello everyone, my name is Coach Logan and welcome back to the next episode of the Coach Logan's Bowling for Newbies playlist. I can't preface again how excited I am to continue to involve all of you as much as I can within the sport of bowling and be sure that we're all educated on the right things to think about as you continue to develop your mind and grow within the sport. So in the previous handful of episodes, I talked about, what to look for as your ball is going through the pins and ways you can learn to apply this rotation on the bowling ball. And I hope, since all of you had a chance to view that the easy and more complicated ways of hooking the bowling ball, that you've been able to go out and at least bowl a handful of times to kind of get a little bit of muscle memory engraved in your brain, because those concepts are what allow you to score well. There is no professional that throws the ball exactly straight, and there's also no professional that doesn't know what to look for, let alone how the scoring works. So all of you are well ahead of the ball game and well set up for success to ensure that you are continuing to develop in the right ways. Quick disclaimer before I start to get into the nitty and gritty things within this episode. So if you have not been watching this via navigating to the channel and going through the playlist tab, there is a video that I will have on there that I am strongly encouraging all of you to watch prior to watching this one. And it is the introduction to adjusting when it comes to the sport of bowling. So many bowlers, especially when they're brand new, don't know that there's a whole world of this invisible playing field, which I'll discuss a little bit here, that is very, very, very complicated and is perhaps the most complicated part of the sport. If you're diving into this without watching that introduction video, you're going to, most of it will be an expansion of that, me diving a little bit deeper into some of those concepts. So I'm strongly encouraging all of you to navigate to it. I will also leave a link in the description below if you just want to click on it and go to it. And then coming back to this video to ensure that you're coming in with the correct base foundation of knowledge for me to expand upon here. So to kind of piggyback of what I discussed in the last episode that I just discussed a brief moment ago, there's this invisible part of the sport when it comes to the oil. So many bowlers that are brand new, and even people that just go out and bowl with some friends for a birthday party or something every once in a while, the very common theme that everyone notices is, especially if they're using rental equipment, that everything's kind of gooey and sticky and oily. Well, that's because of that oil that's applied onto the lane surface. This oil is what is allowing your bowling ball to hook the correct amount. If your bowling ball, if there was no oil applied onto the lane, okay, and you tried to release a bowling ball by hooking it, it would see so much friction instantaneously, almost like a car driving, and it would hook right away, and you would not have any controllability. I'll have some clips shown up of bowlers that are bowling without a single ounce of oil on the lane, and I'm sure you're noticing right away that these bowling balls don't look like how it looks like when you throw it, because of how that oil is being applied only over a certain amount of feet out of the 60 feet that there is from the base of the foul line to the front of that first pin. That is what is causing your bowling ball to react later on down lane because the oil doesn't span the entire way. So your bowling ball is spending the first 40-ish feet on the lane sliding through all that oil, and then after it cuts off is then when it is able, the wheels in the car are able to turn easier and it's able to hook. So that is why your bowling ball is making that shape, which I'm sure all of you have come to realize, whether you've realized it or not. Because of this aspect, there is some adjusting to it, right? So in the easiest terms, right, if we know our bowling ball is hooking too much, we need to make sure that we're getting it to glide through the oil for longer, so that way it hooks later, right? So the easiest methodology that you can follow is to move in the direction of your miss. Now, let's say I throw a bowling ball and it misses the pocket to the left-hand side. If I move my feet to the left-hand side of where I was standing on my last shot, this will cause my bowling ball to travel over the middle of the lane for longer, of which there is 10 times the amount of oil within the center of the lane than there is in the outsides. Therefore, this will cause the ball to react less aggressively and react later. Vice versa, if I'm having the opposite problem, right? If my bowling ball is going and it's missing the pocket to the right-hand side of the pocket I'm aiming for, I can move my feet to the right to allow it to get into the outside of the lane quicker, where less of the oil is, causing it to see more friction sooner and hook sooner. Now, I know for all of you that are fresh starting out, that concept can seem kind of foreign, but I'll blow up a quick photo of what the oil actually looks like, even though we can't see it. And I'm sure you're noticing within those two outside arrows, there's a bunch of the color orange, and onto the outside of that, there's not. That is representative of the volume of oil that is applied in that section of the lane. And if you notice, it doesn't go all the way up to the pins, it cuts off. So at the very, very least, even if your ball is going through a ton of oil, it is designed to read at the very latest following the cutoff of that oil where there is nothing but friction for your ball to read off of. Now, the number one thing that I wanted to expand off of that for all of you within this playlist is the biggest question that a lot of people don't even realize when they're first starting out, and that is, what are you looking at? there's going to be two most common answers that I'm sure all of you are probably going to say. It's either, Coach Logan, I don't even know what I'm looking at, or you look at the pins. Now, I'm going to kind of break this down in a way that's outside of bowling to kind of put some understanding to this and something outside of it. So the best way I can describe this sort of concept is to think of shooting, right? So if I'm trying to shoot at a target and there's one that's a foot in front of me and one that's 10,000 feet in front of me, right? The obvious answer for which one would be the easiest to hit is the one that's a foot in front of me, right? Because it's closer, it's easier for me to see, and if I'm a little bit inaccurate, I can afford to be more inaccurate on the one that's closer because it's right in front of me, versus the one that's 10,000 feet away. I have to be accurate down to an atom of room for me to hit that target. This exact same concept applies in bowling, right? If you are looking at the pins and looking way down lane, you're looking at where you want your ball to end up, sure, but not only is that a difficult target to hit since it's further away from you, but because you are now all, provided that you've watched the previous video and know how to apply hook onto the bowling ball, if you apply hook onto the bowling ball and you throw it in the direction of where you want it to end up, it's going to hook away from your anticipated target, right? So imagine that shooting analogy again, and I'm trying to hit the 10,000 foot target, and I'm aimed at the 10,000 foot target, but my bullet goes like this. That's the kind of methodology that we're falling victim to here if we look at the pins, right? So the number one thing I will always advise for all brand new bowlers fresh starting out to look at is the arrows. The arrows range in their distance because they make that sort of triangular shape, but they all fall within the realm of the 15 foot away from the foul line. And the beautiful thing about these arrows is they never change. No matter what bowling alley you're at, no matter what it is you're at, no matter what the surface of the lane is, they all come with those exact same arrows as well in the exact same place. So what this means is these arrows is almost turning that 10,000 foot target into the 1 foot target. If I look at an arrow and I know if my ball goes over that arrow, it will end up in a certain spot down lane and get me into the pocket, that makes it easier target to hit. It's easier for me to see because it's always in the same spot and is always there and is very definitive. And it allows me to hone in on something a whole lot easier than looking at the end result or just not knowing what I'm looking at in general. The number one common issue that most people do still continue to fall flat on when they're looking at the arrows is that sort of methodology where I talked about, right? If you're looking down at your target, but your bullet, or in our case, bowling ball is moving, we can't look at where it needs to end up, where the end goal is, but rather we need to accommodate for that. The best way I can describe this for someone who is brand new is to think of where you're standing currently and think of, if you hit your arrow, will my ball end up down lane before it reads and hooks following the cutoff of that oil? Will it be to the right-hand side of the pocket for a righty or the left-hand side of the pocket for a lefty? What I mean by this is your ball should not end up before hooking right in line with the pocket because then it'll hook past it, right? It should end up to the outside or closer toward the outer edge of the lane. So if whatever arrow you're looking at, if you know if your ball goes over it, and it's not going to hook into the pocket, but rather hook away from it, that means your eyes are not focused in the right arrow, right? You have to base the arrow you're looking at based off of where you're standing. I'll kind of draw a little bit of an example here. So I'll draw someone that's looking at the third arrow and what line they're looking at. Now, based off of right here, if they threw straight, that would be the right arrow to look at. But if they curve the bowling ball or hook the bowling ball, that would not be the correct arrow to look at because now their bowling ball is going away from the pocket where they want it to end up. Instead, to compensate for this, you should base where you're standing off of that arrow to make it end up to the right or left of the pocket that you're aiming for. So let's say, same exact example, we're looking at the third arrow, but this bowler knows that they apply some rotation onto the bowling ball. By moving into this position here, this allows their bowling ball to end off on the right side of the pocket. Then, once the bowling ball reads after the cutoff of that oil, it is then hooking into the pocket. It's almost like video games and shooting where there's wind or something that causes the bullet to move and you have to compensate for it. It's that exact same sort of philosophy within bowling. And I know, especially if you're brand new, it's very, very hard to conceptualize this, but I'm going to continue throughout the process of all the more complicated things moving forward throughout this playlist to provide some sort of imagery and something for you to base off what you're looking at, because this is something invisible. We can't see this stuff. But the bottom line is look at something definitive. So look at the arrows, know where your ball will end up beyond the arrows, and know the basic rule of thumb of adjusting, and that is to move in the direction of your miss. A good portion of the more finite things is going to come from experience. And if you're new, you just lack experience, and that is a-okay. Make some crazy adjustments, try to be drastic with things, so that way you can kind of get an idea of how sensitive it is, right? For me bowling and you bowling, if I look down at my feet and I move 2 boards left and you move 2 boards left, it might cause our balls to react differently because we don't throw the same way, and that is okay. So go out there, make some drastic adjustments, and play around and see how you can apply this rule of thumb, see how you can learn to conceptualize what's going on beyond the arrow you're looking at and trying to hit, and I promise everything will come with time. As I've harped on plenty of times, if you ever have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to me. And if you are like watching this and you are well ahead of me, like my rate that I'm posting these, my next step for all of you to start to kind of dive into would be to hop into the Pathway of Learning playlist and start to watch those, because those expand well beyond this, more into the intermediate and beginning to be more advanced levels. But I think that the whole point of the end goal of this series is to help segue you into the Pathway of Learning. So the sooner you can get involved in that Pathway of Learning, the sooner and better off you're going to be. And then you can even start to get into the other new series, which is the Coach Logan's Arsenal Advanced and Adjustments playlist. As always, if you enjoy this kind of content, be sure to leave me a like and a subscription. It really helps me out, and I will see all of you on the next episode of the series.